there we go. So out of nowhere, I just get this message from Suris that says, spanking rim jobs? I guess sign me up. Before this, I had sent him a video of, it was from Kunk on Earth, where she's interviewing a philosopher and is like, when I play Sonic the Hedgehog, if I don't have free will, is that Sonic the Hedgehog playing me, or is that the universe playing Sonic the Hedgehog through me? And philosopher answers, the universe playing Sonic the Hedgehog through you, or whatever. And it was a funny interaction. It was like, it's about Sonic. I think Suris will appreciate that. So I sent him the video. This is how he responded, by saying, spanking rim job, sign me up.
Oh, okay. Okay. So now I know where the confusion was. So
okay.
So
yeah, let's finish reading the conversation first, then you can clarify. So as not sure how you got there from the video I sent. Then Sir says, I just woke up, so I'm not even sure how I got out of bed quite yet. Today I learned that Dead Domain, the person who did the NIFB undercover documentary, has a Magic the Gathering channel now. To which I'm like, so are you saying you'll get out of bed if I promise spanking rim jobs while watching Dead Domain's Magic the Gathering stuff? Because that's what I'm getting out of this conversation. To which Sir says, I feel like none of us are getting what we want out of this conversation. To which I replied, okay, fine, I'll spank you while licking your asshole. Jeez. So now, Sir, now that I've read the conversation, can you tell me how you got spanking rim jobs out of the video I sent?
So, the video you sent was not where I got it from. Somebody sent me a video in one of the chats of I think it was an Indian guy, I'm not 100% certain, that was working with clay. And so he was just smacking the side of a big clay pot as it was being rotated around on the machine.
I think I've seen that video, actually.
So in my sleep-addled brain, I thought that the video you sent me was that one. So I was just like, yeah, spanking rim jobs, sure. And now I understand why you didn't understand what I was referring to.
I was so fucking confused.
I understand now where we got there, because I woke up, and when I wake up, my brain blends things together, which it is not a good thing. It's why I try to drive as alert as humanly possible, because the last thing I need is the lanes to do that. But,
yeah, so you called me while you were driving for a little bit, I assume as someone to talk to so you could, like, be focused?
Basically, because I was, I had an hour and, 10-minute drive to do.
Yeah, so when my partner got home that day, I was like, Kevin was like, hey, guess what I did today? I had a phone call with a friend. Because it's not really something I do. Okay, so yeah, this makes a lot more sense now, knowing that you thought that I sent you a different video.
Yeah, no, that's where we got there from. Now I understand why you were confused, because I also don't tend to look back on those conversations, just like they happened, and then I go on with the rest of my day.
You have disappearing messages turned on. You can't look back.
Yeah, I do. So when the conversations are done, my brain's like, yeah, that's already happened. Why would I go back and reevaluate that conversation?
Rafiki has a whole thing about this.
Yeah?
It doesn't matter. It's in the past.
It doesn't. Ow, that hurt. Why'd you do that? Doesn't matter. It's in the past.
Oh, yes, the past can hurt.
No, my day was, I got up in bed, browsed through all of my chats to catch up on where things were. Crucio X Legion, thank you for the subscription. Gifting a subscription. And I saw on Twitter that Dead Domain had done apparently their 10th episode on their podcast for Magic, and it took me a minute to even recognize that it was a Magic podcast, because the name of it was something ATOG, and ATOG is one of the early banned cards from Magic's history. So I was like, oh, Dead Domain plays Magic. That's interesting. And it didn't occur to me that the name of the podcast was that because it was a Magic podcast. That's how sleep-addled my brain was. I couldn't put two and two together on anything. And so I contacted Dead Domain.
Nice day for fishing, ain't it?
Yeah, I just contacted Dead Domain and went, hey, we should do an interview. And apparently I managed to get all of that scheduled while my brain was barely functional. I don't even know how I did that. So I'll have Dead Domain on my channel tomorrow, and then I'll be on their channel talking about Magic next week. I don't even know how I managed that. in the state I was in, obviously.
You sent them a message for asking for spanking rim jobs, and they were like, "Ooh, I am intrigued."
Jesus Christ.
I'm sure that didn't happen. I don't know what Dead Domain's opinion is of spanking rim jobs.
I guess I have to ask tomorrow during the interview.
This is one of those things where, like, I know just enough about Dead Domain that I could probably get myself in trouble by just, like, accidentally crossing a line. So, like, I'm sorry.
Jesus Christ.
Anyway. Frank Turek, going back to the classics today, says, when a doctor delivers a new baby, the doctor doesn't invent the gender of the child. He or she looks at the child and says, it's a boy, or it's a girl. It's not like they're randomly saying, well, let's say this is a boy, or this boy is a girl. We'll assign that. So
what? That's not how that works at all,
like,
Frank. What?
I feel like Frank has had the difference between sex and gender explained to him a bazillion times before. But,
yeah.
like, also, like, even in the sex assigned at birth thing, like, it's not always clear. Intersex people exist. And even if intersex people didn't exist, well, okay, no, I was going somewhere that also assumes they do exist, so that doesn't, my intro there doesn't, okay, I short-circuited my brain. What? I did not sleep well last night.
Sleep-addled brain people
I did not sleep well last night. I had a, so one of the kids woke up in the middle of the night, crawled in bed. That was on Heidi's side of the bed. Didn't really affect me that much. But then the other one started calling out. And so I was like, okay, well, Heidi can't get out of bed because there's a kid over there, so I'll go take care of that one. Even though we're making progress. They used to, if I showed up after they called, they'd be like, no, not you, mummy. But we are making progress to where if I show up, they'll still be disappointed, but they'll let me do the thing. And so he was just coughing a lot and needed his puffer. So I'm like, sure, fine, whatever. I did that. And then a few minutes later, he crawled into bed with us. So now there's 4 people in our bed, and it is a king size bed. So it's a good size bed. But the one that was in between me and Heidi is the one that likes to cuddle. And I have this weird thing where I cannot sleep if I am being touched.
Reasonable.
And like at all, like one of the ways that Heidi can keep me awake while I am going on a long drive is she can just kind of caress the back of my head, something that would put a lot of people to sleep. But I'm just like, nope, you are touching me, so I cannot fall asleep. And so when he joined us in bed, he was cuddling me in such a way that his nose was pushed up against the middle of my back. And this is also the very snotty child, so like it was gross and wet and I'm being touched and yep, nope, that's my sleep is done. I'm just going to lie here and pretend like I am asleep for the next 4 hours. So yeah, anyway, back to the doctor thing. What I was gonna say is that there are here you go, Clueless Expert says, can that magic vision see the baby's gametes though? And yeah, that's what I was kind of getting at, is that there are people that have external male genitalia, genitalia. It always throws me for a loop because I don't know where I picked it up, but genitalia isn't actually a word. It's genitals.
I've always heard genitalia as a word, and if anybody tells me it's not, they're wrong, and they should probably stop talking. But that said, I think what you're trying to say is people who have forward-facing female genitalia, but internally their gonadal structure is not that of ovaries, but it's actually like ovotestes. Stuff like that can happen, where you've got somebody who, for all intents and purposes, the doctor would go, yeah, that's a female, because the things we see on the outside are the female things.
Yeah, they don't test chromosomes at birth. They don't do a sperm count at birth.
And even if they tested those things, that doesn't mean that the actual identity of that being, when it's old enough and can consent to, identifying, it says nothing about where they're going to end up then. Yeah,
Fennec says you don't produce sperm at birth. I mean, I'm not gonna. I don't know enough about it to disagree with that, but I thought that there was always sperm being produced. It just didn't have any way to come out until puberty made things happen. But and yep, and chromosomes aren't the whole picture. Yeah, I know. We are trying and failing to flesh that out. But yeah, no, I like there was a case of I'm trying to think of. Okay, this is the part I hate about streaming is when I remember something, but I can't remember where I read it. Because I know there was a guy who had a penis, had testicles, had a wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
Everything's working fine. Didn't find out till he was in his 40s that he had a fully functioning uterus inside of him that was producing eggs.
Yep.
So
weird shit happens.
What like he had male external genitals, he produced sperm, had kids, identified as a male. He says, I'm a man. But he also produced eggs and had a functioning uterus that could have carried a baby to term. He'd have to give birth by C-section, but could have still carried a baby to term. So like, what sex is that? It's both.
Fuck if I know.
And I actually, so Katie Montgomery has started YouTubing again, and she had a video where she was responding to a PragerU video on sex and gender, and one of the things that she pointed out is that if you have, and I'd never thought of it this way, so it's really helpful to think about it this way. So if you have a trait that is binary, so let's say it's big gamete, small gamete. It's binary. You produce one or the other, or like those. Like that is the trait that is binary. There are big gametes and small gametes. Nothing in between.
Yeah.
The PragerU video talked about it throughout the entire animal kingdom. So that's just not true. But like, let's just assume that's true. If you have a binary trait, then automatically you have 4 states that trait could exist in the organism that has that trait. You could have one. You could have both. You could have neither, or you could have the other.
I didn't think about that. I've always thought about the things that are in between. The fact that even in binaries there's at least the 4 options, that has never occurred to me before.
Yeah, because like if the trait is truly binary, then that means the presentation of that trait has 4 options, at least. And then when you combine binary traits, because like you also are either X or Y, if we ignore all the ones that are in between. Mm-hmm. So let's grant that that's a binary. Okay, now we have 2 binaries combining, so that's a total of 8 potential states, I think, if I did the math right. I didn't do very well in data management.
I am going along with you on this one because numbers are beyond me. When I've got a spreadsheet in front of me to help me, I'm great. When I'm doing it off the top of my head, I'm dead.
Yeah. So it's like you have these 2 binary traits, minimum of 8 states that they could present in. So why are you saying sex is binary when there are these different things that they aren't even binary categories? Oh, my bottle's empty. I have to go back here.
Guys, can we get that sound clip of just Rhino going, "Aw, my bottle's empty"? Way funnier than it should be.
Ooh. Is that a Nightmare Before Christmas reference?
No.
Yes, it was.
And if it wasn't, it is now.
She was flashing her legs at me.
Oh. How was that a Nightmare Before Christmas reference?
Because Sally does that to distract.
Thank you for redeeming your points
Man.
for Nixie-chan. I appreciate it.
That was the motion that she was doing. I don't know. 4 by 4? So it's 4 times 4, so that'd be 16 options. You don't remember that? When Sally distracts Oogie Boogie Man from Santa?
No.
With just her leg?
I haven't seen... Man. The last time I saw Nightmare Before Christmas, I can't actually talk about that on stream. Never mind. Anyway.
Okay. Yeah, so I knew this was going to happen eventually, but the math people are correcting me. It's 16. So when you have 2 binary traits interacting, there's 16 potential options.
Jesus.
And then, of course, we're getting the they'll say sex is a binary with exceptions. If there's so much as one exception, it's not a binary.
Yeah, it stops being a binary.
Bimodal distribution.
Yeah, it stops being that once you have the extras there.
And then, of course, animals that switch sex based on populations. And what's great, though, is that, like, you get the PragerU video where they talk about how the whole animal kingdom is a binary. It's either male or female. Every animal needs a male and a female. Like,
except for the ones that don't.
Never mind the ones that reproduce by parthenogenesis, the ones that reproduce asexually. Like, there's all sorts of different options. There's algae that have like the gametes are not as differentiated.
And then they'll say, but
so, like,
humans
you can't
aren't.
Really tell a lot of times.
Then they'll respond by saying humans aren't algae.
That have tens of thousands of sexes based on gamete size.
Yeah.
Fennec saying there's a lizard species with 3 different types of males. Sure, I believe it. I haven't heard of that one before, but nature's weird. So, like, PragerU brings nature into it, saying they're all binary. We can demonstrate it absolutely is not the case. But then when you do demonstrate, the goalposts suddenly shift and be like, oh yeah, but the humans are binary.
Yeah, they'll say it's just the humans we're talking about.
Then why did you bring up animals?
Yeah, why did you bring up all these other things that you're wrong about if they weren't relevant to the discussion? If they weren't relevant to the discussion, then rescind your previous statement. And if you won't rescind your previous statement, we'll just assume that you're wrong.
Okay, so I know that's a link to the Wikipedia for it's the side blotched lizard, and I know that with the number sign there, it'll take you down to the sex category on Wikipedia. But the way my brain read that was like, here's a link to Wikipedia. # sex these guys.
Oh my god. Actually, you know what this kind of reminds me of? Did you see the video where it was like Ben Shapiro versus a bunch of liberals for on trans issues?
I didn't watch the video, but I am aware of its existence.
Okay, so there was a trans man that was talking to Ben Shapiro during it, and there was no inclination that they were a trans man. They were very, very easily passing, like everything that you would expect for somebody who would be able to just go full stealth mode through life, right? Mm-hmm. And so this person starts talking with Ben Shapiro and doesn't allude to the fact that they're trans, doesn't do any of that, but starts pointing out how you're obsessed with trans people's genitals. And then Ben Shapiro goes, no, I'm not. And he goes, well, yes, you are, because you can't stop talking about mine. Because you can't stop talking about what's between my legs. And Ben Shapiro's like, I didn't ask what's between your legs. And he just starts going off on him like, no, you didn't ask what's between my legs. But what you did do was you did do this, and this on all of your podcasts, on all of your shows, on everything you've ever talked about, where you acted as if you're at a 30 on trans people and their genitalia, and you can't stop fucking talking about them. And then every single time Ben Shapiro tries to interject even a little bit after that point, the trans man just stops him and just goes, no, you're not talking anymore. When you get to talk, bullshit comes out of your mouth. I get to talk now. Never, ever you. And just... You can see Ben at, like, watching Ben give up. Watching that man actually give up on trying to say anything because he realizes it will never happen. This person will never give him the ability to speak in this conversation. I'm just like, you know what? That's how you handle a fast-talking salesman. You will remove their ability to talk.
Mm-hmm.
If you've played D&D or World of Warcraft or any... like MMO or RPG style game, how do you deal with a mage? You silence them. They are too powerful unless you can clock them in the throat. And how do you do that? Well, if you're in a big debate setting, you just if it's not an actual
I was going to say
setting,
I usually play a barbarian class, so I just smack it with my axe.
Yeah, if you're not in an actual debate setting where you've got the times, you're just like, no. If you are given a fair stage, you're going to be a fucking asshole. You are going to argue for the side of genocide and fascism. So we're just not going to let you speak.
But you know that he went to his platform after that and spun it as like, see, they wouldn't even let me talk. That's because they can't, their ideas can't survive in the marketplace of ideas. Otherwise they would have been able to let me talk and counter it instead of cutting me off.
Yeah, but the thing is that if somebody like Ben Shapiro is allowed to talk, then he gets the win. Not because he's right, but because the only thing he knows how to do is spin something. I forget which politician it was, but they were doing an audit with some members of the Republican Party, and this video popped up on my feed. This is why this is very conjecture and not like something that I can hang my hat on. But she basically made the politician agree to only respond to her questions with rhetoric or reality instead of actually going into anything about why they said the things they did. She went, no, we're not going to do this word game thing where you get to get your sound bites in your word games. We're just going to ask you, when we bring up something that you have said on the record, rhetoric or reality. Did you say this because you believe it, or did you say this because this is rhetoric that you need? That's it. And so every single time the Republican tried to justify their answer, she was like, I'm sorry, that's not what we're here to do. We are here for you to say rhetoric or reality. And almost every time when it was something about immigrants or trans people or anything, it was always rhetoric. Every single thing he had said that was bad about immigrants was always rhetoric, never actually reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
you notice how they're not talking about them eating dogs and cats anymore?
Because they won.
Yeah.
They don't have to talk about them eating dogs and cats because they won.
I saw someone post on Blue Sky, they're eating the checks, they're eating the balances.
Yeah.
Didn't think of it this way before. Mirilana says, also from a purely social construction standpoint, which gender is, they have a standard, not a real man/woman, which implies that there are degrees to gender. And if there are degrees, it's not a binary.
A real man wouldn't do that. Well, if there's a real man and a not real man,
then that implies that there's more than two genders. Anyway, moving on from Frank Turek.
Yay.
Mark Andreessen, who I believe he's some billionaire guy that was on Joe Rogan somewhat recently. And they were talking about debanking and just getting everything wrong. And Joe was just sitting there like, oh yeah, no, that sucks. Ooh, yeah, that's bad.
That's what he does.
They shouldn't be allowed to do that.
He's the voice
Jamie?
piece.
Jamie? Do they really do that? Jamie said they do.
He's the quote centrist voice piece of the right.
How does anyone see him as centrist? I don't know how he is so popular. His show is so fucking boring. I tried listening to it occasionally. Just be like, I make fun of Joe Rogan, not infrequently. So like, I should at least like be aware of what his show is. So like, I tried listening to it. It's just like, no, this is so boring. This is just two people having conversation about something that doesn't matter to me. Like, a billionaire talks to a millionaire about debanking. Like, no, you get like neither of you.
So
like, no, it's just, I don't know.
A common thing that I've heard said, and I'm willing to hang my hat on when it comes to Joe Rogan, is the least interesting part of the Joe Rogan experience is Joe Rogan himself. You do not go and watch that show for him. You watch for the guests, and then you stick around because he's the lightning rod that brings the guests. But Joe Rogan himself doesn't really carry any of that. He just lights a he just talks.
Through his commentary career, he was able to get connections that nobody else could.
Yeah, that's basically what it ended up being.
Yeah, because that's the thing, is like, not every episode of the Joe Rogan Experience is always like right-wing talking points or whatever. Like, he has, Cara Santa Maria has been on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm sure that was an interesting episode to listen to, but I will not be going through the catalog to find it.
Bernie Sanders was on the Joe Rogan Experience.
Bernie Sanders has been on it.
Yeah. It's
Flint
just that
Dibble.
more
Flint Dibble
often
has been on the Joe Rogan Experience.
It's just that more often than not, it's been used as a right-wing mouthpiece.
Mm-hmm.
More often than not, it has been. And those few episodes where
it's because Joe is such a blank slate.
Mm-hmm.
So like, whoever his guest is, he will just agree with whatever the fuck they say. And so if his guest is a right-wing conspiracy theorist, Joe will be like, oh, that's interesting. Wow, tell me more about that. Jamie? Oh, Jamie Googled it, and the first link that Jamie clicked on was the guy who said the thing to me it was their website. And it confirmed what he just said to me. Therefore, it must be true.
Oh,
so yeah, and that's not an exaggeration. That actually happened at least once. I forget who it was, but like they said something crazy, and Joe was like, "Oh, that's crazy, Jamie. Can you verify that?" And Jamie did a Google search, and he was like, "Oh, well, the top result is this." And they didn't say it on the show, but if you go and look at the website that Jamie said that it was the website of the guy that was on the show making the claim. So he literally verified it by checking that guy's website.
Which is not a good way of verifying anything.
No, generally not, no. Anyway, Mark Anderson says, words that are on their way out: problematic, resilience, harm. Seems problematic that those words are on their way out, if you ask me.
Just a little bit. Just a little bit.
Just a smidge.
From what I understand, speaking of words on their way out, didn't Gutsit Gibbon do a video on all of the words in the education system where she lives that are currently being filtered out because of the newspeak?
I hadn't seen that. If she did, I'm sure it's an excellent video because Gutsit Gibbon is pretty awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, no, I haven't seen that, but yeah, no, I saw the list of words, and so many of them is just like so much research that has nothing to do with any of the shit that they're trying to filter out is going to suffer because of this. And the stuff that they are filtering out that they're actually targeting shouldn't be filtered out either. So like, fuck them. Like, I legitimately, when I saw that the CDC had pulled down their data set, I went through my my link tree that I have of all the trans related research, and I downloaded PDFs of all of that research to keep on my hard drive, because I don't trust that because a lot of it is hosted by the NIH or the HHS. Those are both organizations that Trump controls now, apparently.
Isn't it funny that one of the first things the Nazi Party did was the book burnings of trans research, and one of the first things...
That was the first book burning.
...that the Trump administration is doing is the modern-day equivalent of a book burning with trans research? God, it's so fucking weird!
Apropos of nothing, this is the book I'm reading right now. Good book.
Just...
Basically talks about how Berlin came to be the center of LGBTQ research. I don't know how close it gets to the Nazis or if it gets to the book burnings, but this is actually, I'm reading this as part of research for, I am working on a video right now that it's, what was the book? It's called Gay Berlin by Robert Beachy. And it's basically the story of, like, it opens with what is essentially the first out homosexual man in modern Europe, and how he advocated for gay rights, and how he saw a surprising amount of success given the time period that he was existing in. It was like the late 1800s. Yeah, this is part of background research for a video that I'm doing that's primarily responding to that stupid New York Times article that was like, we should consider throwing trans people under the bus in order to get more votes.
Speaking of that, just a really quick call out. Fuck Brianna Wu. Just a really quick one. Fuck Brianna Wu. I'm sorry. Doing the whole, actually, it's the trans people's fault. Shut the fuck up. You spent your entire life being a closeted trans person.
She sees the leopard coming for her face, and she
befriended all of the leopards.
She's throwing up a last-ditch effort to get them to not eat her face. And you're like, maybe if I show extreme loyalty at this point, they will leave me alone.
Yeah.
And you know what? They might, but they also might not.
Yeah, I just
and
cannot
as much
stand her
as much as I also say fuck you, Brianna Wu, I'm not going to take joy out of, like, I'm not going to take joy when trans people are persecuted because of this administration, even when it's a horrible trans person like Brianna Wu.
Well, the thing is, I guess the reason that I'm pissed off even more is that I used to be in a group chat with her. So, like, there was a potential world where this was going to be a friend of mine. There was a potential world where this was somebody who I would have done more work with. And I even mentioned on my channel that, like, there was a video that I wanted to do on trans legislation that she was going to help out with. But then this weird thing happened where, like, every day there was some other reason she wasn't able to film it. And now I'm happy that those random reasons, whatever they were, materialized and she wasn't able to film anything because I don't have to have anything that she contributed on my fucking channel. Just
I mean, there's an alternate universe where I became the Protestant version of Brian Holdsworth. Because I seriously considered going to college to get a degree in philosophy when I was a good little Christian boy, and specifically the philosophy of religion. And given my proclivity for being a YouTuber,
you would have just become Brian Holdsworth.
Yeah, except Protestant. I even have the little hint of red in my beard. I don't
you have the
hair,
hint
though.
of what could have once been.
Oh, man, that guy's a pretentious asshole.
Yeah.
Next up, we got End Wokeness says, holy shit, the FBI just revealed that 5,000 out of their 13,000 agents were focused on the January 6th protesters, 39% of the entire bureau for this. And then he showed that really heavily edited video that purports to show all the protesters staying inside the railings and not making up a scene and like just basically being tourists.
What about the people who went in and like fucking sat at Nancy Pelosi's desk and started threatening to hang Mike Pence? What about
the people that
those
broke
people?
the windows to get in there? The people that bashed police officers in the face with fire extinguishers? Like, yeah, I would think, what was it, 104 people were injured? 5 people died?
Yeah, I feel like there's a bunch of people. Like, I'm not going to be gaslit on what January 6th was because I was covering it on my channel live as it happened.
Even on Twitter, in the replies to this, on Twitter, there were people posting like, oh, you mean this? And they'd show other videos from January 6th that show them very clearly not being a peaceful protest. Also, and again, this is coming from Twitter comments, so take it with a huge grain of salt. But it's not the FBI revealed they had that 5,000 out of the 13,000 agents were focused on January 6th protesters. It's that 5,000 employees of the FBI worked on an investigation at some point to do with a January 6th protester.
So they weren't just they weren't resources that were just hung up for years.
Yeah, and also, like, if you remove the category of agent from this, it was 5,000 employees out of the 40,000-ish employees that they have. So that's a much smaller percentage. And it's like, it's just someone that worked on one of the cases at one point. It's not like they were specifically investigating that one person. Jesus. Well, I mean, some of them I'm sure was some of that, but like
I love my country.
I think people's perception of law enforcement has been too much shaped by the propaganda stuff that is like CSI and NCIS and like all these murder mystery type shows that are done from the cops' perspective. I mean, because in all of those shows, the investigators, like the people collecting the data, trying to solve the case or whatever, they're always focused on one case
at a time. Yeah. That's
not how it works. I mean, they'll have like 5 or 6 cases on their desk. They'll do a little bit of work on this one, a little bit of work on that one, a little bit of work on the other one. They jump between them throughout the day. They don't have like in most cases, they don't have one case that they are focused on. So like these 5,000 employees, that wasn't their only case. They were doing other stuff too.
I mean, so technically, that is entirely by design. The idea that the people who work in law enforcement are case-by-case superheroes, like that is the point of propaganda.
Meanwhile, something like, I forget whether it's 40 or 60% of murders go unsolved.
Yep.
And I've heard it said as a joke on multiple different podcasts, how, like when the subject of like domestic abuse comes up, it's like, hey, did you know that bleach looks like a heart attack and they won't ever question you on it? Just saying. I'm just like, does it? I don't know. I'm not going to Google that. I don't want that in my search history. But
remember, if you, what is it, like 48% or something like that of police are domestic abusers?
It was 40%. 4 in 10. I remember that one because H-Bomber guy made the joke about that, and he made some joke about police officers, and he was like, "Oh, it must be true because like police are like really really good at this thing. Just just look up 4 in 10 police officers, and you'll find that right away." And it's like, nope, that's not what you find when you Google 4 in 10. But yeah, no, those are the ones that there's actually like credible accusations against. That's not, if I remember correctly, it's not. So the actual number is likely higher.
The actual number is probably a lot higher then.
Okay, then case orbs, because we're doing the classics today.
We always have to go back to case orbs.
Says Biden just signed up with the same agency that represents Obama. So it's the agency in Hollywood that manages like when they're speaking engagements and whatnot.
I mean, that's what you expect, right?
Because Biden, the guy who worked very, very closely with Obama for Obama's 8 years as president, signed up for the same agency as Obama because, like, you know, maybe they're still friends or whatever, and so they recommend things to each other. But Kevin Sorbo takes that and says, like I said before, I left Hollywood because they're all pedos. So
no, you left
Biden
Hollywood
and Obama use the
because
same agency, therefore they're pedophiles?
Yeah, case orbs, I feel like you left Hollywood because people realized you were a talentless hack, and you couldn't get jobs anymore in Hollywood.
Thank you for the hydrate midnight lilac and new hat from is that Jake? Yes, that's Jake. Boop. Octo hat.
Also, it's very funny that saying all people in Hollywood are pedos is not actionable enough as a defamatory claim that he'd be perfectly safe. But if he were to actually name somebody in Hollywood who was a pedo, and then it turned out that they weren't after an investigation, then he would be in hot water.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, if he knows people that are pedophiles,
maybe he should report them.
Yeah.
I mean, you know they're all pedophiles. You must have some evidence that they are. Maybe you should do something about that.
Well, I mean, I guess his excuse for that would be like, oh, well, they're in control of everything over there, so there will be no investigation.
Well, then maybe you should roll those dice and find out. Who knows? Maybe you'll manage to save a few kids in a pizza parlor or some shit.
Oh, well, don't bring that up.
I have to speak their language or they won't listen.
Fucking Pizzagate. That was so stupid. So fucking stupid.
It was. And it is.
Another Kevin Sorbo says, funny, the party that arrested and persecuted January 6ers don't believe in borders when it comes to countries. That's the libertarians.
I believe in borders for countries the same way I believe in borders for states. They're nice suggestions for legal reasons.
Yeah, they are ultimately arbitrary. However, as arbitrary as they may be, governmental systems are necessary. And they exist. And they have borders. Mm-hmm. So, like, borders are the same as gender. It's a social construct that has very important implications for our lives.
It's a thing we made up, but it's a thing that matters to a degree.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I know the idea that a United States person who wants to flee into another country right now has to do a whole application process in order to do so is still baffling to me.
Why? It's the same. That's actually baffling to me, that attitude. It's like, I'm sure you didn't mean it this way, but the way that comes across as a Canadian is like, oh, well, I'm American, so I should be allowed to go into any country I want.
Okay, so let me rephrase. Let me rephrase to make it maybe make a little more sense. I feel like when you have countries that are known allies to one another, you should just have the freedom of movement between those countries. And I feel like to a large degree, the United States and Canada...
So the European Union is a good thing.
Yes! Yes!
Okay. I can get behind that. The way you phrased it initially was just like, I'm American. Why won't they accept me?
Why won't I be able to go in any country? No, that's not what I'm saying.
Everybody in the world wants to come to America. Why won't they let Americans come to them?
No, it's more along the lines of if we are a known ally with a country, one of the agreements for that allyship should be that the members of both countries should be able to freely roam between the other countries. There's no fucking reason that we shouldn't be able to.
Miss Kitty doesn't care, says we used to just need a driver's license to cross the border. I remember those days. Now you need a passport. And yeah, it used to be really easy to cross the border. It got harder. I don't want to say 9/11 was the turning point. It probably was, but I didn't really cross the border all that much before then. And I was crossing the border when I was driving with my driver's license, and I was not driving at 9/11. But yeah, I remember when they made that change. For a while, there was like an enhanced driver's license you could get that counted as a passport-ish sort of thing,
Mm-hmm.
but it would only work between Canada and the US. Olivia Williams says, as someone who used to be a libertarian, they are supposed to believe in open borders. Yeah, I I was also a libertarian at one point, and that's one of the whole sovereign citizen things, is that like, no, your government has no authority over me. Governments are arbitrary. They agree that it's a social construct. They just go the opposite direction, be like, therefore it means nothing, as opposed to therefore it's important to society.
Yeah, it's important to how society functions, but
Yeah.
that's not the same thing as this thing is the be all end all. Like I remember my parents. I don't remember when this argument was had, but there was something about like the something being wrong because it was illegal, and I just stared. I think it was my mom. I just stared at her and just went slavery. Just like are we just gonna say things are good or bad because of legality? In which case, slavery. Like I feel like that's the easy one to go to.
Yep. Yeah. Legal does not mean good. But yeah, no, it's but also, what do January Sixers have to do with believing in borders?
People in yeah, no idea. Probably the same
Like,
thing that
we're charged. Well, I guess maybe they're saying like because they were charged with like things like seditious conspiracy, it's like you're betraying your country, but you don't believe that the country is a thing that should exist. It's like, nah, that's the libertarians. I mean, the anarchists as well, I guess. So we have them on the left as well.
I mean, there's a bunch of people right now who are trying to go for techno-fascism, where we don't
You
have
mean like Elon Musk?
yes, Elon is one of them, where we don't actually have a United States anymore. We have a grouping of disparate nation states separate to one another, and they all have their own little rules and they all have their own little czars, basically.
Hunger Games.
That's there's a channel called Blonde Politics that actually compiled all of the interviews with a shit ton of tech billionaires, and most of them are all like, no, democracy is bad and the United States needs to be done away with and it needs to be replaced with this system. I'm like, oh, that's fucking scary. That people with money have this opinion, and people with money can then make other people deal with their opinion.
Yep. Okay, Raw Egg Nationalist says, amazing how quickly people forget maybe the worst environmental disaster in American history. Literally apocalyptic. Yeah, no, we haven't forgotten that, but keep in mind that that wouldn't have happened if there was a robust system of regulations around the railroads in the States.
Yeah. Yeah.
Train derailment is actually shockingly common. That's just the one that got the press because it had the nasty chemicals that started mixing. And also, I'd say the worst environmental disaster is the slow burn that the GOP is doing with regards to climate change.
The one
like, that... If every single person in Palestine, in East Palestine, Ohio, or whatever, ends up getting cancer early and dying from their cancer, the death toll from that will be significantly smaller than the death toll has already been due to climate change. So, yeah, that was a shocking, acute. That was an acute environmental disaster. That was massive and terrible. But the more broad environmental disaster that's like slow playing in front of us
is the one that gets ignored.
Is the one that is actually just being forgotten about and ignored.
Yeah. Well, people tend to look for shock and awe as their poster child for something happening, right? So it's very hard to point to 15 different small things that all ultimately culminated in something. People are not programmed to see that way. People are pattern recognizing individuals when they give a shit. So what people mostly will look for is the one thing that happened. So in this case, the one trail derailment that was important, or the very, very recent one, the one thing that means America's fascist. We don't have a one thing. That's the problem.
Yeah. No, we just have James Inhofe bringing snowballs into Congress and being like, how could there be climate change? Look at the snowball in Washington, D.C. It's like, yeah, it snowed in Florida. You know why? Because
climate change.
Well, because and this is why they had to change from global warming to climate change, because yes, the globe is warming, and these the warmer average temperatures can do things like weaken the polar vortex, which allows Arctic air to flow further south than it otherwise would have, and that's why you get snow in Florida. That's why the cops in Houston were able to do donuts in the snow. That is climate change. Yes, global warming can make it colder sometimes because there's cold air up in the Arctic that the warm air normally keeps up there. But
and it's displacing now.
Yeah. So. Rothmus says, okay, so Emily May says, can y'all imagine if Kamala were president and she was allowing Bill Gates to casually dismantle our government and then he took over the payment systems in the Treasury? Yeah, it would be...
Yeah, people would be freaking out about that.
And rightly so. But Rothmus says that dismantling the government is good no matter who's doing it. I disagree.
I feel like the person dismantling the government... So, dismantling the government is not good no matter who's doing it. And I'm going to go ahead and but I'm going to cite Conquest of Bread as a very, very good blueprint for why this is the case. Conquest of Bread pointed out that during the French Revolution, one of the biggest problems that happened with the workers rising up was that they didn't figure out what should be put in place infrastructure-wise after dismantling the current infrastructure, and it's why they failed. Who is dismantling the government does matter, because the answer of why are you dismantling the government is always going to be followed up with what are you putting in its place, and who is dismantling the government will always have a direct correlation with what is put in place afterwards. One of the things Kropotkin pointed out in Conquest of Bread is that if you cannot solve the problem of bread, which is an overarching term for infrastructure that people need to live...
Is this why it's called BreadTube?
Yes!
What even is BreadTube?
Good question.
Okay.
Nobody who is BreadTube knows they're BreadTube until somebody else tells them they're BreadTube. I've looked at Rational Wiki, and apparently I'm considered BreadTube on one thing and not considered BreadTube on another. I don't care.
Am I BreadTube?
I don't know. I don't know. I don't know what it is or who it is anymore. But it does matter because the people who are putting something in its place are also usually the people who are trying to dismantle the government. So, if you are looking at techno-fascists, the reason that they want to dismantle the government is because it provides checks and balances that prevent them from acting as their own little czars of fucking nations on a blockchain. That's the reason why those people need to be stopped.
Who says I'm BreadTube?
Like, who is dismantling the government is very important to whether or not it should be allowed to be done in the first place. You would not say who dismantles the government doesn't matter if it was actually Hitler marching the Third Reich down into our fucking White House.
It's also, like, what parts of the government is being dismantled? Because most of us, the anarchists and libertarians aside, most of us would agree that some government needs to exist. Government needs to happen. It's just a fact of life.
I'd also argue it's going to happen. It's not necessarily, it's not so much that it needs to happen; it's that it's just going to happen.
It's like, yes, there is a hypothetical anarchist system that will perfectly replace the government. However, in the real world, that is not going to happen because someone will always consolidate their power and form a government.
Yes.
So I would say that, like, the people on the right and the people on the left, and like they even disagree with each other, but like we will all agree that some of the government could use with some dismantling. Like, I would say the military is a little bit bloated.
And the military is getting more inflated instead.
Well, yeah, it is. It could probably do with a little bit less. Just a smidge, you know. It's only like you guys are only like the top spending. You're like top spenders on your military by like a factor of 100 or something.
And yet somehow we still lost to Afghanistan.
Yep.
Like, somehow all of that money, and we just suck.
That gives me hope that there's still hope for Ukraine. If Afghanistan can beat the United States, then surely Ukraine can beat Russia even without the United States backing them.
The thing is, with Donald Trump's recent admission that we are going to be trying to occupy Gaza, that gives me no hope where Ukraine is concerned, because he's
just going to continue on and be like, yeah, no, we'll turn Ukraine into a resort.
He's also been trying to push for us to leave certain agreements that we've had with the United Nations. Which...
I mean, he's already basically said fuck NAFTA.
Which fucking scares me.
Mm-hmm. As it should. But it's okay. Jon Stewart said he's not a fascist because we voted for it.
I wonder if he's ever going to walk back those words.
I don't know. Oh, John Strand says, exclusive, shocking video of violent FBI raid on Bobby DeGregoris and his family. He was totally innocent on J6, a truly peaceful protester. These fascist government stormtroopers drag his wife and kids into sub-zero conditions, terrorizing them with assault rifles. Pure evil. It's really fascinating to me watching how both the left and the right will flip-flop on their views on cops, depending on who's being victimized.
The cops are good so long as they're beating up the people we like?
Yeah, basically. Because, like, that's the thing. I don't think you can... I don't think if you go back in our catalog, you'll ever hear me talk about the January 6 cops as though they are heroes, except for maybe the one guy who actually did, like, actively lead a bunch of protesters in the wrong direction. By basically, like, waving his arms around, be like, come and follow me, I'm over here! It's like, just like Merry and Pippin drawing the orcs away. Like, come and get me, it's working! Of course it's working, Pippin, run! So, like, I might have said that he was a hero, specifically, but I will not have used the term hero to describe cops in general. I don't think ever. And, like, yeah, I have gotten upset about them beating a cop in with a fire extinguisher, because that's not because
I think, like, police are abusive. I don't think they deserve to die.
Police are abusive. Nobody deserves to get smashed into the face with a fire extinguisher, except maybe there's a small handful of people that I would be okay seeing that happen to.
There's a few I could think of. I don't want to name them.
Yeah, but it has been interesting watching, like, the left is suddenly supporting cops when it's January 6th, but and then seeing the right be like, oh, this is police brutality. And it's like, man, these are the tactics that they've been using for years, and you've been supporting them through this whole thing. But now that they're going after your guys, it's a problem. Like, I agree, it's a problem. Also, I watched the video that he posted. It's nowhere near as bad as what he's making it sound. Like, they basically politely escorted them outside the home before they went in to search it.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, it's not like they busted down the door and started shooting at people willy-nilly like they've been known to do when it's black people.
We take our justice into our own hands, guns blazing.
Yeah, no, they politely escorted them out to the porch, and then they searched the house. Like, it would suck to be outside in the cold of that, and like, maybe they didn't give them a chance to get their coats, and that would suck. But it's just weird seeing people on the right be like, oh, these police are it's fascist. It's fascism for these police to be able to, like, go into a house without permission. And it was like, really? Tell me more. So I don't disagree.
We just want you to be a little consistent, that's all.
Yeah.
Hey, thanks for making it to the end of the video. I really could not do any of this without all of you. Those of you watching, and especially those of you who support me on Patreon. I wanted to go ahead and take a minute to thank all of you who do that, because with YouTube being what it is these days, I really cannot do this full time without the support from each and every one of you. Those people would be Red Joker, Purple Poundini, Jemshin, Britzkrieg, Jupe the Malignant, Michael, Ravalern, Mabbity Babbity, Astral Frontier, Tales of Atonement, Nixie Chan, Kiri Artemis, Victorian Alchemist, I'm not saying the last part of that, and you know that. Arcton Arclacier, Kiratorian, Dren Hadamata, Jordan M, John L, Lord Bleck, Smiling Game Master, and Fireshard. Thank you so very much. But since you're here, why not go ahead and try watching another one? There should be one that's on the screen right now. And if you are a patron of mine, I wanted to go ahead and thank you again for all of your support. There is still a video you could press though, if you'd like. I would appreciate it just a little bit.